It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn, Vincent. There are many political races going on. One taking up a lot of oxygen is the race for a Michigan Senate seat. That's in part because of what it says about the state of the Democratic Party, or what it will say. Most polls have Abdul El-Sayed leading in the race, but there are still big questions. Can he beat Haley Stevens, a sitting congressperson who's popular for bailing out the auto industry and for being a moderate in a swing state? And most importantly for Democrats, which candidate is more likely to beat Republican candidate Mike Rogers? Dennis Darnoi is the founder of Densar Consulting based in Farmington. He often promotes Republican candidates. Most recently, that was Tom Leonard, who was running for governor, who we've had on this show. He's here now to discuss the Senate race and what it says about Michigan politics. Dennis, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, so first things first, the big news. What was your reaction to Mallory McMorrow dropping out of Michigan's Senate primary race?
I was surprised a little bit by the timing because obviously absentee ballots had been out for 10 days. So that means people may have voted for her. Yeah. I do think, obviously there is a debate tonight for the Democratic Senate candidates over in Grand Rapids. So the fact that it's now a two-person debate that Democratic primary voters can look at both candidates and not have that third candidate there, I think is very good. But yeah, the timing was a little bit surprising. Again, I think she had just received an endorsement from a major newspaper, maybe
the Free Press,
Free Press a couple of days prior to that. So it's kind of, hard to believe that only 48 hours later she then decides it's time to drop out. But at the end of the day, this is a two-person race. You have a progressive candidate, you have an establishment candidate. Michigan in November is going to be one of the states that determines control of the Senate. It's one of the big eight. All the other states, with the exception of Michigan and Alaska, have chosen their candidates for the general election. So all the eyes are in Michigan to see what the Democratic Party is going to do and who they're going to choose.
Let me ask you, Dennis, before we get into the two candidates who are left for this Democratic primary, why do you think Mallory McMorrow dropped out?
Well, I mean, again, look at her poll numbers. She started off very well, and then she decreased in the polls, and it was a consistent decrease. And at a certain point in time, you have to recognize that you're spending people's money, and again, we'll find out how much she had left once campaign finance reports come out. But if there's no chance to win, if there is no pathway, then what is the argument to stay in? And having consistently polled in third place, I think she looked at it, her team looked at it, and said, this is the time to get out. Now, again, having been in politics long enough, I don't think anything happens by coincidence. I would imagine that she didn't drop out without something, else in mind. And we'll probably find out what that is a little bit later on in the cycle.
Do you have thoughts on what that something else is?
Well, I mean, obviously when you look at the front runners for both of the gubernatorial races, you're looking at individuals who don't have state legislative experience. And when you talk about someone like Mallory McMorrow being a state senator, obviously having a decent following among the base, having a decent national fundraising apparatus, she'd be someone who I'm sure her name will be mentioned as a potential lieutenant governor candidate to bolster that ticket. But again, I think you look at the numbers and you say to yourself, okay, I can't win this race. What can how can I help the Democratic Party? How can I help myself?
So potentially this could be a very strategic move and a way that McMorrow is carving out a different path for herself that would elevate her on a state level.
Certainly. And again, I think, as a candidate, she has very intelligent, very savvy consultants guiding her campaign. I am sure that as they entered this race that they had multiple plans. Obviously, the one is, can I go in? Can I win? That's number one. But if absent that, where can I land on my feet and am I best served? I mean, maybe she's someone who wants to, take a media job and have a more high profile job and can be able to have a wider range of where she can spread her message. I mean, that's certainly something that could be under consideration. But again, I would suspect that their campaign team clearly has an idea of where they'd like to see her go next, and they had an exit strategy. And once they saw the numbers and once they saw their fundraising numbers, they decided this was the time to execute that strategy.
Okay, I want to move on to the two candidates on the Democratic side. And I am especially interested in your perspective because you're giving us more of the Republican side of things here. So Congresswoman Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. The former is more moderate, the latter more progressive. Most polls have El-Sayed leading in the race. Why do you think that is?
Well, right now, what you have in the Democratic Party is you really have this split, and we've seen it nationally, races in Colorado, California, New Jersey, New York, where progressive candidates are running against these establishment candidates, and they're being more successful because the Democratic base is really looking for two things. They're looking for people who are going to fight, and they're looking for people who are anti-system. And an anti-system campaign works when people think the system is failing them. And many people look at the political system and they look at the leadership of the Democratic Party, whether it's Chuck Schumer, whether it's Hakeem Jeffries, and they say that these individuals are not fighting hard enough. They're not fighting against Republicans. They're not fighting against Donald Trump. And they're too happy to sort of take an incremental approach. And so, I think part of what El-Sayed has done is he has taken issues such as Medicaid for all, taxing billionaires, taking money out of politics, which is something that you discussed in your last segment on data centers and how that's influencing the policy behind data centers, and that's just something that's resonating with a younger group, with more progressives, and so I would question some of the polling. One of the things I think we always look at is the polling representative of what the Democratic primary is going to look like? And so one of the reasons Bernie Sanders was successful in 2016 is he was able to elevate the number of younger voters, 18 to 40. And I think that's, again, a tactic or an approach that El-Sayed is trying to replicate.
I mean, when you talk about the anti-establishment stance that has helped politicians rise to prominence, I mean, look in the White House. This was the stance that President Donald Trump took, right? So is it that people who are taking more of a populist tact on either the left or the right have more of a chance right now of succeeding in politics because it's speaking to some discontent of voters? Absolutely.
They're speaking to what motivates people to turn out. And people are incredibly frustrated with the political system. They don't believe that anything's getting done. While, we're struggling with higher energy costs, higher food costs, higher gas costs. And so, yes, the politicians who can speak to that, energy, who can speak to that dissatisfaction with the political system are the ones who are doing very well. And the second part of that is those who can use social media well to generate that message across a very wide forum.
I'm glad you're bringing up social media because this does seem to be something that's really drawing a line here when it comes to which candidates are able to speak to voters and able to mobilize younger voters. I mean, this is where a lot of young people are getting their information from. It's where they're getting their news from. And so I'm thinking now again about Abdul El-Sayed, who has a lot of confidence, and it's a lot easier to get attention these days, to capitalize on being a captivating person. We're seeing all of this from him on his social media channels. Let's listen to something real quick if we could, Dennis.
Shouldn't be this hard to afford a second bag of groceries. Shouldn't be this hard to work the same job tomorrow that you worked yesterday. Should not be this hard to see a dentist or a doctor. And it should not be this hard to pay your taxes in April and know that that money is being spent on you and your kids rather than to drop bombs on other people and their kids.
I'm guessing that hearing from Abdul El-Sayed just then didn't necessarily change your response, what you were about to say before that. Go ahead.
And I think it reinforces what I was going to say in the fact that, one, you're hearing directly from the candidate, and voters, as distrust rises across multiple institutions, the ability to hear directly from a candidate is something that they want. Second of all, what you heard in that clip is him speaking to the everyday experiences that voters face. And so, when you talk about dentists, when you talk about groceries, that's something that's very relatable to everyone, regardless of age, regardless of gender, and in many cases, regardless of ideological leanings. So again, when you can hear directly from the candidate speaking to the issues that matter most to you, that's going to resonate. And the more that you can populate social media with these clips, across all different forums, you are going to have a lot of success, and you are going to get a lot of attention.
It's not just some of these kitchen table issues, though. I mean, a lot of the Democratic Party has been fighting about its positions on Israel and Palestine, especially amid what many scholars have called a genocide against Gazans at the hands of Israel's military. How much of El-Sayed's positions on that and his not taking AIPAC money do you think is getting him ahead?
Well, I certainly think it's a huge benefit to him. And what you hear from candidates like El-Sayed, and again across the United States and all these districts where these progressive candidates are doing well, you heard him specifically talk about money that goes into healthcare or into food, not bombs. That is a line that has been used across Democratic primaries to drive home the point that that what the U.S. is doing and their support for Israel, and the genocide and the killing that they've discussed and identified, that is something that resonates especially with younger urban voters that make up the Democratic primary. So I'm not going to call it code, but it is a talking point that is used across all these races, which resonates because, again, that is an issue that is at the core of these younger voters' thoughts and minds, and why he is able to be successful here in Michigan, like we saw other candidates be successful, again, New York, Colorado, New Jersey, California.
As someone who's very immersed in the political sphere, Dennis, did you see this coming, that Israel and Palestine would become this huge dividing line in politics right now?
I don't know that I would say that I saw that issue, but what I would say, and using this as a very loose term, you have seen the Republicans went through their Tea Party moment, and now where they railed against their leadership. They thought they were too old. They wanted generational change. And you've seen that grow in the Democratic Party. So that this issue became the catalyst, no, I wouldn't say that that's as much of a surprise, but there is a huge generational change and a generational desire to see something different, and that's very similar to what we saw with the Republicans and the Tea Party going back to 2010.
It's The Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Dennis Darnoi. He's the founder of the political firm Densar Consulting. We're discussing the Senate race in Michigan after Mallory McMorrow dropped out. Now, we've been talking about Abdul El-Sayed. I want to move quickly to Haley Stevens. She's a congresswoman who's known for coming from an Obama era of politics. She helped bail out the auto industry. She's quite moderate. She's been pro-Israel, saying in 2022, quote, being pro-Israel is both good policy and good politics. She's got endorsements from Attorney General Dana Nessel, former Governor Jennifer Granholm, former Senator Debbie Stabenow, the Michigan Teamsters. What is her appeal, as briefly as you can? Well,
she is the establishment candidate, and I think that she can follow the sort of bold centrist policies of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. She's somebody who can get something done. I think she's more focused on the policy side, the legislative side of things, and she's won tough races. So I think ultimately, and again, Republicans face this, do you want to win the primary with someone who's 100% ideologically aligned with you, or do you want to win the general election with somebody that maybe you disagree with 80%, or disagree with 20%? So I think she's she's obviously a very capable candidate. She's run really tough races. She's, won in swing districts. And what might play in a safe blue district doesn't necessarily play in a competitive purple state. So she's got a lot of great qualifications. And again, we'll see tonight as those two stand on the stage side by side, who's going to be able to really captivate the motivation of Democratic primary voters.
Let me ask you, Dennis, who are Republicans rooting for right now? Because who do conservatives think is going to have less of a chance of beating Mike Rogers?
Well, it's two different races, right? So if you run against a Haley Stevens, I think, you're looking at the Rogers campaign as saying, okay, this is akin or very similar to the race we ran against Slotkin. If you're running against someone like El Sayed, I think that there are openings there that neither Slotkin nor Stevens presents the Republican candidate. So I do think that there are some issues. Again, we're talking about a purple state. So yes, you may win a blue primary, but trying to then translate something, let's say, by abolishing ICE or defunding the police. Those are things that I think a Republican candidate, Mike Rogers, we presume, could use against him in a general election where the independent voters, the purple moderate voters, who, again, they vote for person, they don't vote for party, could look at and say, that's an issue I don't agree with, and that's an issue that I have a real problem with. And that's where the independent voters could then look at the Republican candidate and say, again, I may not agree with you on 20% of the things, but on 80% we're in lockstep. So, I do think that, that's just a great question for Democrats to decide who is the stronger candidate in the general election. Because, again, if they want to take back the Senate, and that's going to be a hard task as is, you cannot lose Michigan. Democrats cannot lose Michigan. Whereas Republicans, if they pick up Michigan, that's a gain for them, and they're almost guaranteed to retain control of the U.S. Senate.
Do you think there are a lot of those purple undecided voters left? I mean, every election I'm actually quite surprised at the number of folks who it seems like are having a tough time making a decision. Do we still have a lot of those voters, or are people more likely in these, so-called divisive times as we've been describing them, are they more likely to pick a side? Have they picked a side?
When you talk about a statewide race, yes, there are the independent purple voters that still exist. In individual districts, state legislative or congressional districts, no, they're drawn in such a way that there isn't that many, people willing to cross party lines. But no, in a statewide race, you are going to have people who are going to look and say, okay, I might go blue for the governor, but I'm going to go red for the Senate. And that's what makes Michigan so competitive. And again, we have to realize that what we're doing here in 26 is always viewed through the lens of 28. So a lot of people are looking at Michigan and seeing, okay, have they moved more blue or do they remain purple? And how is that going to help me if I'm going to run eventually as a presidential candidate?
In the last 30 seconds we have here, I realize the Republican Party is reacting to all of this, and I'm talking about the rise of far-left candidates. They're reacting to it by calling Democrats radical and insane and communist. Do you think that's a good playbook?
Well, it's certainly the one that they're going to use in this election, and they're going to try to call progressives, communists, and hit that line. And I would suggest that there's a reason that they're doing that. When you look at polling numbers, there is reasons for that. But whether or not that's a great overall strategy, I think remains to be seen.
Dennis Darnoi is the founder of Densar Consulting in Farmington. Dennis, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is The Metro. We'll be right back after the news from NPR and WDET.